Hi, Heathens. Welcome back. I am very excited. Today, I have with me the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, he who has three first names. The man whose Twitter following thinks that that I was serious when I said I was canceling him for having more names than me and then argued with me for like one of my whole days. The notorious Andrew Mark Henry, aka Religion for Breakfast. Hello, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah,
Of
I've always
course.
complained that my last name is Henry instead of like Matthew. Then I could just be my own set of gospels. Be like Andrew, Mark, and Matthew.
Hey,
That it's Henry. It's too very very boring Anglo name when it could have been something New
when it could
Testament.
have been Matthew.
I mean, it could have been any of the apostles, and I could have just been my own New Testament.
Could have been Paul. Yeah, I mean,
Sure,
you could legally change it.
I could change it. Yeah, I mean, yeah. The amount of people that call me Henry is legion, and the amount of people that call me Mark is legion because they just look at a bunch of first names and then just call me one of the three.
That's really
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
perhaps I shouldn't have teased you about that then.
Oh no, I've gotten so used to it, but
In
and
any
there's so
event,
many Andrew Henrys, hence the middle name. I
yeah, well, I sort
wish
of
my
that was my
that.
guess as to why
Yeah.
there's like all of them. Yeah.
There used to be a Facebook group called My Name is Andrew Henry, and I was a member of it. And the president, who was Andrew Henry, would send out regular messages to the Andrew Henrys of the world, sending out encouragements. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
defunct.
My first name is very common, Jessica, but it's spelled slightly differently.
Yeah.
Um, and my last name is what it is. But there's somebody in Texas that is named Jessica with my last name, but with an I. And when I tell you that this woman gets all of my emails, like all of them, and when I write my name down or my email down for people, I capitalize the E. I like underline it. I'm like, I know this is weird, but like it's not going to come to me. Um, and then I get an email from Jessica in Texas, like, I think this is for you. I'm like, thanks, sister. You're the best.
I mean, you could just befriend the person, then you'll just yeah.
Yeah. Also, thanks, Mom, because I'm never going to find my name on a mug. Uh, okay, enough about my weirdly spelled name. So, most of my followers know you from their YouTube channel, Religion for Breakfast, which personally I thought was ripped from a Newsboys song. But I was incorrect, friends. I was incorrect. So, can you give us a little bit of background, like what inspired you to start this channel, and potentially where you got that name from?
Yeah, sure. So I started Religion for Breakfast in the midst of my PhD program. I think it was like year 3 or 4 of my PhD program. Um, and at the time, I was just a super fan of educational YouTube. I was watching all the OG educational YouTubers, and I just started to realize that there's nothing in terms of religious studies on the platform. There's a lot of educational YouTubers that talk about physics and biology and history, and a lot of people talk about religion, but usually from an apologetic point of view or an activist sort of view. And there's just no straight religious studies YouTube channel. And I was like, well, I know the genre because I love educational YouTube, and I have the camera, so I can try to be that person. So I just kind of started it on a whim. It actually started as a blog, and nobody was reading it. And so I tried to pivot, and I pivoted to YouTube. In terms of the name, I had the idea of a YouTube channel for months, and I never pulled the trigger because I didn't have a good name. I was like, it needs to have the word religion in it for search engine optimization, but I don't want it to sound stuffy and academic because so many of these biblioblogs at the time would be, ad fontes or some Latin phrase or Greek phrase, and like it's just so self-aggrandizing. So I actually pulled out a band name generator. There's websites that can generate a band name for you, and a lot of band names are weird, like Red Jumpsuit Apparatus. Like how the crap did they get that name? So
Oh, it's okay. You can say it.
no, it's okay. Try to be that PBS of religious studies. So I typed in the word religion, and
Wrong show for you.
yeah, probably. So I put the word religion into the band name generator, and I hit the reset, the refresh button a bajillion times, and eventually it came up with breakfast religion, and I'm like, that sounds close. And I was like, breakfast religion, it's not really grammatically correct. Like, is breakfast the adjective? And then I just like flipped it in my head and just clicked religion for breakfast. And so like Yeah, so it means nothing. I can retroactively say, oh, it's your healthy daily dose of religious studies scholarship, but that's just retconning a very random uh, band name generator that gave me the idea.
Okay, well, excuse me. So what, I guess if we back up even further, like what sparked your interest in religious studies? Like how did you end up in your PhD program or I guess potentially in your undergrad? Um,
I started.
what is the origins? You know, what's your villain story?
I started really as a Roman history nerd. I was
Same.
always interested in the Roman Empire, and I found myself gravitating toward the late Roman Empire during my undergrad, partially because I saw it so undercovered. I mean, especially in the media. I mean, how many sword and sandal movies out there that focus on Julius Caesar or Caesar Augustus? You know, like the first century basically. But some of the most interesting stories to come out of the Roman Empire are post Constantine. Like, why don't we have an HBO series about Constantine's rise to power? Like, my God, like that would be so interesting. So I found myself gravitating toward the late Roman Empire, and when you gravitate toward that field, you can't help but be interested in early Christianity. The clash between Roman paganism and Christianity, stuff like that. So I kind of fell into the field of early Christianity through the lens of history. I was a history major, and when I started applying to PhD programs, I applied overwhelmingly to history PhD programs. I applied to like 12 programs, and two of which were not history programs, two of which happened to be one was a classics program and one was a religious studies program. And for anybody that knows, it's very difficult to get to a PhD program. 100 people will apply for a single position. Just really excited to make that, $20,000 a year stipend living in expensive cities. Just really, really competitive. So I was rejected from everything except for three programs. It was a history program, a classics program, and a religious studies program. So it was like this holy trinity of like, you need to choose your path forward. And I had never really considered religious studies. I was like, I even had to like ask my potential advisor, like, so what exactly is religious studies? Like, I'm a historian. We're historians too, right? We're studying the past. And he's like, yeah. So I kind of chose it because it was the advisor studying the stuff closest to what I study, which is early Christian magic and demonology and popular religion in the late Roman Empire. So the person who would be my advisor was closest to what I wanted to study, and I feel like I took a risk to enter a PhD program, but it ended up a PhD program about religious studies instead of history. But it was the best decision ever because I fell in love with the field, and it was mostly through the religious studies theory classes. Because for the first time, I had to grapple with like, oh, what is religion? What is a ritual? What happens when someone undergoes a purification ritual? What does purity mean? So like, religious studies scholars kind of critique these categories that we use so blithely in our day-to-day conversation. But this is something that historians don't really get, and why I'm skeptical of historians that study religion that have not properly formally studied religion, because they'll whip out terms that they have not really thought about. Like, okay, what does it mean to convert? Especially in the Roman Empire, when you convert to Christianity, is that like a Protestant coming, evangelical Protestant having a born again experience? Like, no, conversion looks very different in the. So like that's the sort of stuff that really made me fall in love with the field, where it's like, wow, this thing that we call religion is weird and interesting. And so now I'd much rather pick up an article on like, Haitian voodoo in the 21st century than an article on like late Roman economics. Even though my field is late Roman studies, I'm more interested now in religion writ large as a topic.
So how do religious studies humans define religion?
I mean, that's one of the things that like religious studies scholars always punt on. I mean, I like using like a family resemblances definition, like have a checklist of things that are religion-y, and if it checks enough of those boxes, it's religion. And then like I'll use it as an adjective that's religious insofar as it applies to like uh, separating between something that's sacred and something that's mundane. Something that has functionaries that mediate the sacred and the mundane. So like what we would call a priest. Um, and I try to use the term like a way of life as opposed to a belief system, because an observant Hindu or an observant Jew, like that, it affects every aspect of their life: who they hang out with, who they marry, what foods that they eat. So it's more than just a belief system. It's something that kind of is embedded in every corner of culture and every corner of your life. So I use like if I can just come up with a definition off the top of my head that I have thought about before, but it'd be like a way of life oriented toward the sacred and the profane that often involves beliefs, certain behaviors that we call rituals, and then certain identities that we might call a religious identity. So that's the 3B framework: beliefs, behaviors, and a sense of belonging.
Sounds like someone may have asked you that question before.
Yeah, it comes up too much. I really need to have a better answer, but for me, it's the 3B framework: beliefs, behaviors, and then belonging. So I am Christian, or I am Jewish, or I am Hindu. Like having a sense of belonging, and then a sense of sacredness. I think is probably pretty crucial. That doesn't necessarily mean supernatural, but something that's special.
I am starting a cult. No. So you said that your focus was on demonology and magic in the ancient world, and I think that, at least for me, like I mean, I've read a couple articles here and there on it because I'm constantly reading random stuff. But can you sort of give? This is a big question, but sort of like a general feel for what that would be like in the ancient world? Because when I hear demonology now, right, I'm like, okay, I kind of know what that is.
Yeah.
But what would it have meant to people in the time period that you studied?
So when I think
So
about,
I know I gave you an entire list of questions, and I just went off the rails already, like way off the
I'll
rails.
try to pick it apart systematically. I mean, so when I think about demonology, I think about the concept of intermediary spirits. So spirits that inhabit this categorical zone between humans and big, powerful gods, whether that's the Christian god or Tengri, the sky god in indigenous Mongolian religion, or Zeus. These big, lofty, very powerful beings. Then there's this category of these lower beings, or we could call them small gods, that are cross-cultural, whether it's fairies or angels or the ancestors that are kind of spiritualized in different cultures. So when I think of demonology, I think of these intermediary spirits that are frequently clocked as evil, at least in Christianity. Christianity has, at least in the Roman Empire, I guess today too, has a very morally bifurcated idea of angels versus demons. Not quite so bifurcated in traditional Greco-Roman religions. You have the daimon, which is more of a ambiguous creature, and some of the formula from Egypt, the Greek magical papyri, you call upon a daimon to help inspire you, or protect you, or give you a prophecy. So it's not just an evil being. That's where we get the word demon, at least in Christian theology. And so demonology would be like the rituals and beliefs and concerns around these intermediary beings. How do we interact with them? How can we invoke them for what we might call magical ritual? Like, I have dysentery and I want to fix that dysentery. What being should I call upon to fix that? I have a migraine headache. A lot of these so-called
The spirit that manages people's dysentery, like,
yeah.
return to sender, please.
There's a text called the Testament of Solomon, and there's this whole litany of demons and their domains. So Solomon kind of approaches them. It's like, what's your name and what's your deal? And like, oh, I'm so and so. I'm the demon of scoliosis. It's like every single issue you could possibly have, there's a demon that presides over that. So I call this, we can call this folk religion, we can call it popular religion. I mean, obviously all these beliefs intersect with institutional religion as well. A monk or a bishop in a Christian institution also cares about these intermediary beings. But, somebody that's living in rural Syria or rural Egypt in the 400s is much more concerned about that local indigenous daimon that lives over in that spring or that forest or that sacred grove than he's concerned about, is Jesus Christ fully human and fully God? So that's what I say when I mean popular religion. It's more on the ground. I say I studied 99% of antiquity. Every dissertation ever published on St. Paul or St. Augustine are writing about the 1% of antiquity. So it's what I find more interesting, like just trying to grapple with existence in a pre-industrial society where you get tetanus and then you die. It's just a rough world.
It's interesting to think about because so as someone who grew up Christian, like we're not thinking about all those things. We're thinking about Paul and Jesus, and sometimes John. Um, and you kind of have this vague thought that the world is really hard back then. But I don't think we ever gave a lot of consideration to the fact that, like, people back then had very, very limited knowledge and understanding, at least in comparison to what we know and understand about the world today. And so the way that they engaged with that world was very much like they sought meaning in things, right? Or they're looking for causes. Like we're pattern seeking as humans. We want to be able to point to something and say, like, if we do X, that can potentially circumvent Y. Because otherwise, you're just living in this chaotic, can't control anything, like, don't know what's happening world. And so, this idea that, like, at least for me, when I started thinking about it that way, it made absolutely or very little sense to me that people would give up all of these sort of lesser, I guess, lesser gods or spirits or whatever to follow this one person. I don't know.
Yeah, and of course, people didn't. This is what I meant by what does it mean to convert to Christianity in 350 CE? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to give up your beliefs in the ancestors' spirits that go live in that grove over there. There's a bishop named Caesarius who is the bishop of Arles in southern France, what is now modern day southern France, and one of his constant complaints is people going to visit sacred groves. They're going out to the groves again, and it's because they were, rural southern peasants, French peasants in the 400s who, for centuries, venerated some sort of intermediary spirit that lived in that groves. Like, they're not going to just stop doing that now that there's a bishop saying, "Hey, come do the Eucharist here at the basilica." And some would be like, "Okay, I'll go take the bread and wine at the basilica and then go out to the sacred grove." Like, it's a messier.
Very much like something I was talking to Dr. Candida Moss about. And she was saying that there's a bishop that was complaining because all these people are still doing these like cemetery rites where they're all like drinking in the cemetery. And he's like, You guys have to come to church. Stop doing that. And like, no, that sounds like a lot more fun, if I'm being honest. Like, we're going to go to the cemetery and drink and like dance around. Or, hear me out, we could go sit in church. I think you all know what I would choose.
I mean, there's a scholar named Ramsay MacMullen who famously put forth this theory. I think it was back in the 80s or something like that. But saying, like, when you look at the amount of basilicas, the amount of church buildings in any given Roman city, there's not enough to house the hypothetical amount of Christians in the city. So where were they going? Well, they were going to house churches too. But then when you think about the space, like, there's not enough space in the house churches either. So he theorized, well, they must have been meeting in places like cemeteries, and especially when we think about the cult of the saints being such a big deal in late Roman Christianity. So his theory is like thinking of Christianity as a church building based religion in the late Roman Empire is kind of inaccurate because it was much more freewheeling.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I see. I don't remember writing this question, but I'm going to ask it because, like, apparently there's a reason. Can you tell us how to turn invisible according to the ancient Greeks?
Yeah, I think you're asking. I think I did a video on this a few years ago. I mean, there's at least 2 invisibility spells in the Greek magical papyri. So the Greek magical papyri is a modern historical term that we use to talk about a whole body of texts discovered in Egypt that we can call magical. They wouldn't have called it magical. They would have called it like, here's a helpful ritual to get rid of your migraine headache, or here's a helpful ritual to like call down a daimon to help, give you some inspiration. But we call them magical because they sometimes sound magical. And at least 2 of them, I think, are they say a very helpful spell for turning yourself invisible. I'm off the top of my head, can't exactly remember what. I think the one, you take like the eye of an ape and you crush it up with some dung from a dung beetle or something like that, and you smear it on yourself. It's not the most wholesome of.
You'd be invisible, but people would definitely avoid you. So I guess like maybe that's.
I think one of them actually says like a tested charm for invisibility. I'm like, how did you test this? But several of the spells say tested. I forget if the invisibility spells say tested, but
using that word. I'm sure it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I mean, so
Okay,
many of these formulas are deployed into for moments of crisis. So sickness, there's a lot of childbirth and pregnancy formula as well, in a land full of high infant mortality rate, or a high maternal mortality rate as well. Like these are the issues that a pre-industrial society were dealing with. So of course we see rituals congregate around moments of crisis. Sometimes they just seem kind of silly though, like or like business.
I feel like often I would love to just disappear for a little while. So I know that feels right to me. You know?
Super helpful, very applicable.
Exactly. And it's attested. So I just
Yeah,
need to
I
find
mean,
it now and get the eye of an ape.
some
So,
Egyptian priest tried this out, so you can trust what he says.
nice. Why would I doubt him? You know. Can you tell us maybe the difference, or if there was a difference or clear delineation in the ancient world? I like that I'm saying us, like anybody else is sitting here but me and my other personalities. Um, clear delineation between miracles and like miracle workers versus magic and magicians.
I mean, short answer, no. I mean, these terms are subjective terms. Miracles is the clocked as a good term, and magic frequently as a term that's referring to ritual that's deviant or secretive or harmful. And especially in the ancient world, you wouldn't call yourself a magician because that's a term of a derogatory term. So, there's all this debate over like, oh, was Jesus a magician? And there's a historian named Morton Smith back in the 70s who published a book titled Jesus the Magician. And he goes deep into trying to prove Jesus as a magician. I think he's kind of making a category error by deploying this term that nobody would have called themselves. The term magician itself comes from the term magi, which, for those of you that know the Gospel of Matthew, the magi from the east follow a star to Jesus in Bethlehem. It was originally, a Persian religious functionary in the Persian Empire, and they do what religious functionaries do, divination and sacrifices, very normal stuff. But it becomes a more xenophobic, pejorative term for many Greeks and Romans. Oh, magi do weird stuff. They do human sacrifice. They do, magic. And so magia, where we get the word magic, is the stuff that magi do. So it's frequently, not always, but frequently used as a term of accusation. And so there's this Greek philosopher named Celsus who accuses Jesus of being a magician. Oh, he's a magos.
Origen's distress.
Yeah, exactly. So Origen, the Alexandrian Christian theologian, tries to refute Celsus, and he's quoting Celsus, like large paragraphs from Celsus, verbatim. So we know what Celsus wrote, at least in part. And one of the main things that Origen got really annoyed about was Celsus accusing Jesus of being a magus, and also a goes, which is also a term that we could translate as like sorcerer. But calling someone a sorcerer or a magus is a term of accusation. So as soon as we say yes, let's agree with you're either agreeing with Celsus or you're agreeing with Origen, and I would say let's agree with neither of them and try to come up with a more anthropological term. So I've used terms like a freelance ritual expert. So someone who positions themselves as a ritual expert. Hey, you need an anti-dysentery spell? I got just the thing for you. And we can call that a magician, or we can call it a specialist in a particular type of ritual. A bishop is also a particular specialist in a particular type of ritual. We'll call it the Eucharist or baptism or the Christian liturgy. And some of these bishops also specialized in making an amulet with some liturgical phrase on it that you could wear around your neck to keep demons away from you, which we can call magic. As soon as we use the word amulet or talisman, we're kind of invoking that term magic. I would just say it's a defensive object that has a liturgical phrase on it that somebody wore to try to defend themselves from demons. So again, really rolls off the tongue. So the overlap between magic and proper religion is everywhere. Like there's not a strict bifurcation. We could say some ritual is private, some ritual is public, some ritual tries to deal with a particular crisis like childbirth or a migraine headache, and then others are concerned with like a mystical union with Jesus Christ as we eat the bread and the wine. So I try to use terms that are more specific, like protection rituals, healing rituals, exorcism rituals, instead of deploying that word magic. As soon as we say magic, we're being biased.
Just so everyone is aware, there's really no way to prepare people for the amount of dumb jokes that I'm going to make over the course of an interview. So I don't even try. So, like, I want to ask sort of two more questions, and then I want to ask you a bunch more questions, but they have nothing to do with anything important. I just
Sure.
think they're going to be fun. Um, so, I don't know. You can, I guess, answer these in either order. I'm curious what your favorite religious misconceptions are to, I guess, debunk or clear up, or a common misunderstanding that you think needs to be corrected in sort of a more public, not in a public way, but like needs to be more known by the general public. And then the other one is I want to talk to you about your time in Egypt. So I don't know which one you want to go with first, but
I guess we can start with misconceptions. I mean, the one is more theoretical, and I hinted at it early on, which is that religion is way more than just a belief system. I mean, especially in the United States, even if you're not a Protestant, you often think like a Protestant, which is like belief is what matters most. You know, believing in your heart that Jesus is Lord. Like, so whenever you have that Protestant mindset and you approach religious studies, whether you're studying Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, you know, the Yazidi religion, you're like, oh, belief is what matters most. But for a lot of religion, a lot of religious people, it's more the praxis, or it's the identity. So, you know, thinking about conversion in the late Roman Empire, it's not suddenly a born again experience. It might be, okay, this local bishop seems to have command over the demons. I'm going to believe what he says, or I'm going to do the rituals that he does. And this is another theory put forth by Ramsey McMullen, who I quoted before, which is his theory is that Christianity spread so quickly because of exorcism and public miracles, that Christians put such an emphasis on exorcism that was very attractive. So it wasn't necessarily the attractive message of the gospel, the good news of the gospel, but like, oh, they have control over these intermediary spirits that really concern us. So can we envision a Christianity that was more concerned about that than, say, am I going to hell or not? So I guess that would be one misconception. Like, religion is more than belief. In terms of, like, I don't know, smaller, more discrete topics, you know, I'm doing a video on the goddess Eostray, who's where we get the word Easter, and so all the simplistic phrase like Christianity, you know, X derives from paganism, I think is kind of a impoverished view of how cultural change happens. And sometimes, like, every person's negotiating with the culture they're in currently, and sometimes that means
it's a really nice way of saying y'all are dumb. You're ignorant, but make it academic.
yeah. I mean, how does cultural change happen? Sometimes it's accepting something, and sometimes it's rejecting something. So you see this happen, especially in magical ritual, where it's like, oh, we've always relied on this type of amulet, so we're going to keep using this type of amulet, but the idioms are going to change. Instead, we're going to have the Mother Mary on this amulet instead of Isis and Horus, and so, like, it's rejection and accepting of different things. So there's just such this simplistic, you know, they did this, therefore this happened, that I see a lot in the Twitter and TikTok discourse, where I'm like, you know, it's more complicated than that. And
Discourse is a nice word.
yeah. Anyway, let's stay tuned for the AOJ video.
Yeah, and they'll have you plug all your stuff at the end, but I'm sure everybody already knows where to find you. I actually just thought of this question. Can you talk a little bit about the cult of Mithras? Because I hear these comparisons a lot, and I just haven't done any research on it myself. But I did see you had a video on it. I know I don't think it was recent, but you know, whatever. Just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit outside. I don't specifically study the cult of Mithras, so I know enough through, you know, studying early Christianity.
You know more than we do, so.
I mean, I call it a new religious movement in the Roman Empire. It draws on this god, or, you know, they venerate this god Mithras, who derives from the Indo-Iranian culture as this Indo-Iranian god. But by the time it gets imported to the Roman Empire, it's not so much a Persian deity anymore. It's more like a Romanized Persian deity. You can think of it as like Roman soldiers kind of cosplaying as Persians, and it's, yeah, a little bit, yeah. I don't know how much actual, you know, Indo-Iranian ritual and theology made it into this cult, So it's more like a new religious movement that takes beats from Persian religion, and it's an initiation religion. So you go through rituals and rites to kind of go up these different gradations as you're part of this initiation movement. And they met in these underground, spaces called Mithraea, or Mithraeum in the singular, where you would have this iconic image of Mithras, stabbing a bull up in the front. And so, I mean, there's similarities insofar as there's initiation rituals, if we can think of baptism as an initiation ritual in its own right, but it's different in that there's not like gradations in Christianity. They're meeting in a private space, a house church versus a Mithraea, so there's a similarity there. But again, it's like that's kind of how certain religions were done in the Roman Empire. It's not like necessarily Christianity is like stealing ideas or vice versa.
Kind of an existing framework.
Yeah, like there's one way to do religion, which is out in public in front of the temple, which is where the sacrifice would happen, and then you would butcher the animal and pass out the meat to the people there. So there's like one way to do ritual in the Roman Empire, and there's another way, which is you go into a building and you do some sort of liturgical rite together, which might be the cult of Mithras or Christianity. So it's not necessarily like a genetic lineage between the movements as it was like a particular mode of religion. I mean, that said, we don't know that much about the cult of Mithras. There's a lot of material data. We have a lot of the Mithraea. We have a lot of their iconography. We have snippets of text referring to what they do, but there's not really like a text written by a Mithraist that really tells us the story. Like even the story of Mithras, we have like, okay, he was born from a rock. He must have like burst out of a rock somehow. We have pictures. But imagine if we did not have the Gospel of Mark, we didn't have the Gospel of Matthew. Pretend we had no Gospels and we only had pictures. Like Jesus on water, reaching down, trying to pick up Peter, who's sinking into the Sea of Galilee. Like that's the only thing we have. Like we would not really know what's going on there. So I think a lot of people assume we know more than we really do when it comes to this religion.
We like to make things up. All I know is that I would have died if I had to go somewhere and watch them kill an animal like every week. I wouldn't make it.
Yeah,
First of all, but second of all, blood. Oof.
I almost passed out in one of my graduate school classes because we watched an animal sacrifice. Some rural community in India where they just chop off the head of a goat.
Oh my god!
And which is controversial in India. So modern day Hinduism is not a sacrificing religion, but there are people in India who still practice these rituals, and it's controversial. So we watched one of these videos in my Greco-Roman religion class because my professor really wanted us to know, like, this is what animal sacrifice is, and I was sitting there. Well, I'm like, I'm an anthropologist. I can't wait to watch this with cool dispassion. And so the head comes up, little body is twitching, and I'm like, oh, I feel myself becoming lightheaded, which is, for many cultures around the world, like you're butchering the animal yourself. So that just shows how divorced we are from the data. We go to the grocery store and we see a bunch of butchered meat, but we don't think about the process. So anyway,
yeah. I mean, I was vegetarian for a really long time. For that exact reason, because I was like, I don't see it and I know what happens. I'm not anymore, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, so I know that you recently came back from Egypt, where you did a postdoc at the Center for Mind and Culture. I believe you were there for 2 years, but I honestly have no idea what you were doing there, other than something to do with academia.
Yeah, there's actually 2 different postdocs going on here. So the Center for Mind and Culture is where I'm at right now, which is based in Boston. I'm in DC, but the think tank's in Boston, and they do more cognitive science of religion, scientific study of religion. The American Research Center in Egypt, RC, is where I was for 2020 to 2022, something like that. I was working on a Coptic iconography project. So Coptic Christianity is the indigenous Christianity of Egypt. Coptic language being the last phase of the ancient Egyptian language. So, there's a unique form of Christianity grew up in Egypt with Coptic as a liturgical language. And they kind of developed their own iconographic styles. So I was studying the icons of Coptic Christians, and specifically in my research of folk religion, like how can an icon be magical? So we think of an icon as a sacred image of a saint, something that we venerate. Maybe we bow to it or kiss it. If you go into any Orthodox church, you'll see people venerating icons. But I study them as, if this is indeed a place where I can interact with the saint, can the icon itself be a giver of miracles? And so a lot of these stories from Coptic Christianity, but also other forms of Christianity, where the icon actually is an active agent. Like if you have a skin disease, the icon will reach out. Mary will reach out from her icon and touch your skin and heal you. Saint George, famous guy stabbing a dragon. What's the implication of a military saint in an icon where he can stab you out of his, like if you desecrate his icon, he'll stab you with his spear out of his icon. There's stories.
They mean this in like a very literal way, like
they believe it literally, yeah. And again, not just Christians, but
right.
Greek Orthodox, different forms of Orthodoxy, especially focus on icons. But yeah, I mean, there's so many stories of what I would call like active icons, and sometimes you'd be like, I'm trying to think. There's a particular story of a I think a Roman centurion who kept like a pocket-sized icon of these doctor saints in his pocket and would help heal him, or his wife gets sick and he has the icon, touches her with the icon, and she gets healed. There's a story. There's a story of St. George's icon weeping as the Christian community goes astray. There's a story of an icon of Jesus oozing blood, and you collect the blood to go heal your sick kids. So, thinking of icons as like this useful. Well, again, like our problematize the term magic. Like, is this magical? I mean, all this is institutional religion happening in the church. Maybe like the pocket-sized icon. But anyway,
I'm not really telling you that, more of like just pointing out to the masses, like if you grew up Christian, like all of this stuff seemed very just kind of mundane because you heard it so much that it became banal. But it's really weird. It's really weird, especially when Christians are like so anti-witchcraft and like anti-whatever. And I'm like, y'all, I've got bad news. Because you do the same things.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, so I'm very influenced by a school of thought called Existential Anthropology, kind of championed by a guy named Michael Jackson. No relation to the famous Michael Jackson. There's a professor at Harvard Divinity School named Michael Jackson who wrote his magnum opus is called Existential Anthropology, and it's basically like, it's not easy reading. It's great ritual theory to help shape your thinking when you study. Oh yeah, okay, that was lost on me.
Sorry, he has a song called Thriller.
No, I do know that. That's
okay.
The zombie thing. But the reference bounced off my head initially. But the whole theory is around
You're very smart. I'm very dumb, so you can always expect the bottom level from me. Sorry, go ahead. I won't interrupt you.
But Michael Jackson's book, Existential Anthropology, is indeed a thriller, insofar as he talks about ritual as a way for like humans to contend with reality, like to contend with existence, an existence that's constantly trying to thwart us, whether like we suddenly get cancer and die, or suddenly we go bankrupt. There's just existence is constantly trying to thwart us. So how do we regain agency in a world that's constantly trying to diminish our agency? And so he uses magic as kind of an example. Like, well, humans will do anything to try to augment their agency. Like we're doing that today too. Like, oh, if only I, date this person or get this new job, like that will augment my agency. And so when we think about these rituals, it's like, okay, what can you do in a world where you don't have penicillin or a vaccine or something, and you get sick? Have to do something rather than nothing, and that something was like, write this formula on a piece of papyrus and put that papyrus on your head, and that's going to help. So I think about icon veneration in that respect as augmenting agency in a society that sucked to live in terms of
the project that you worked on in Egypt. Is that something that would be made like public or available to the public, I guess?
I wrote a few blog posts on the research, which you can find on RC's website. Forthcoming peer-reviewed research, though, so stay tuned for that. And I also did a video for RC. So if you go to the RC's YouTube channel, I did a video on St. George and the style of religion for breakfast.
Very cool. Okay, enough of the academic.
All this to say, Egypt's amazing. Like if you ever have a chance to visit Egypt, like it's absolutely fascinating. Like we think of
Go there this weekend.
but like ancient Egypt, you think of like Ramses and stuff like that. But also there is the early Christian period and the Ottoman period, like the Mamluk period. Like there's 3,000 years of history or more, much more. At least as far as I'm concerned, is 3,000 years. But Neolithic period, you name it, there's ancient stuff there.
Hey, growing up, there was only 6,000 years of history for me, period, full stop. Yeah. That was it.
Never mind, Göbekli Tepe is, 8,000 BC, whatever.
Don't tell them. Okay. So I came up with these questions when I was drinking scotch one night, so now you know what to expect.
No questions, yeah.
Really high-level stuff here, people. No, I just had been thinking about how I formatted interviews. And I love talking about the academic stuff, but sometimes I think like who the person is kind of might get lost in there, or just like, it's interesting, I think, to hear people's answers to questions that are just sort of silly. So that's what we're going to do.
All right.
My first and most important question, this will determine the rest of my life. No, I don't know. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Yeah, I know this is a very polarizing question. So I'm sorry for the people that will now hate me. I actually love pineapple pizza. It tastes really good. I'm sure it's offensive to some Neapolitan person, but yeah, I love it. Yeah, the whole Hawaiian classic pineapple and ham pizza. Yeah, from Domino's. I'm down.
Fine with pineapple on pizza depending on what it's with. I think that's the thing. Like, I can't have pineapple with certain other toppings. It's just something about I don't know.
I've never tried it other than the pineapple and ham. So I could see it being really weird if it was with like onion or pepper. Because another favorite combo is like onion and pepper on a pizza, like pepper. I can't imagine it going with anything else. Maybe like a different type of meat. Like
I feel like I haven't had Hawaiian pizza in a long time, so I could just be totally misremembering. For some reason, I thought there was like olives involved.
As far as I'm concerned, I thought it was just ham and pineapple, but I could be wrong. But speaking of pineapple pizza, one of my greatest one of my greatest moments as a teacher, I was teaching a writing class at Boston University, and my students were being they were not really engaging with the concept of like trying to craft an argument. It's all about writing composition. So very, very interesting stuff. And so I gave them a writing prompt. I said, you have 3 minutes to write as fast as you possibly can. And then this is the writing prompt. And I wrote on the chalkboard, pineapple pizza.
I didn't know that.
Or I think I wrote Hawaiian pizza. And then I got some of the best writing I've got all semester. It's like some students wrote like these magnum opuses on like colonialism in Hawaii. Another person gave like a analysis of how it tastes and why it's so polarizing. Like it was really brilliant. Like it's such a broad topic. You can go in so many different directions. So that's my greatest pedagogical moment.
I respect it. All right. A bit more serious. Not really. If you could have dinner with any 3 people dead or alive, who would they be and why? And honestly, if you could think of one person, because when I try to think of just one person, I'm like,
three's too much. I mean, I'd be curious to talk to Emperor Constantine, just to see what his deal is. And I mean, just because of my field, I guess the Apostle Paul and Jesus. I just want to know what they're thinking. What were you thinking? And for Paul in particular,
you guys did what?
And Paul in particular, I want to know if he would be flattered or offended to learn that his letters became sacred texts. Like, yeah. I could see him being flattered, and also I could see him being very offended. Like, what? You took this book when I was really angry, this letter to the Galatians where I was just angry at them, and made that a sacred book? Like, I could see him, like, that's sacrilege.
I think he would be flattered. I don't think he would admit to it. He would be like, no, how could you do this? And deep down, he'd be like, that thorn in my side finally paid off.
Yeah.
Okay, if you were going to run for president, what would your slogan be?
Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Fine.
I don't
That's
know.
not a good slogan.
That's
No
not a
one's going
good
to vote for you.
I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, my first thought was
It's
vote
okay.
free Hawaiian pizzas for everybody.
You know what? Hey, it actually in this day and age it might work. I don't know. I don't
Maybe.
understand the state of
I mean, it's
politics
so
anymore.
polarizing, but I just need the 51% and every, like, I just need to win the electoral college. So I'll see
Yeah, I was
what
going to say,
state
Texas really needs that.
like Hawaiian pizza the most. And if it's like Texas and California, I just need to win 2 states. And then there we go.
Okay. Who's the most interesting person you've met over the last year? Keep it above board, okay?
Last year, what have I done in the last year? So it's March 2023. March 2022. I was still in Egypt.
I mean, it doesn't have to be anybody. Like, it could just, I don't know, maybe you met a really interesting person at a coffee shop or something.
Yeah.
It was me. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, that obviously was the question or the answer I should have said immediately. I don't know.
Okay. What was I thinking when I wrote this question?
I mean, you were drinking scotch, so
I haven't looked at them since I wrote them. What show on Netflix have you binge watched recently that you would consider like kind of embarrassing to admit to?
not Netflix, but I watched The Challenge, which is like a stupid sports / vote off the island show. Okay, millennials know. Okay. It,
It's like an MTV show.
It's
right?
like an MTV. It's like if The Bachelorette met Survivor and then threw in like American Ninja Warrior. You took those 3 and they had a beautiful love child. It would be.
Isn't it like also kind of like the real world though, because they're all living in the same house, aren't they?
Well, it's actually a spin-off on The Real World back in like the early 90s. It was like
Oh,
Road
okay.
Rules meets Real World, and then they made a new show, and the new show was more successful than the originator.
Can you? This wasn't a question, but like, so I mean, most people know like I've been pretty athletic for most of my like adulthood. Like I'm super active, or I was. Now I'm just a bum. Um, and so everyone's always like, "Well, would you go on these shows?" Like I'm like, absolutely not. But I'm curious, like, are there any, I guess, reality TV shows that you would want to go on if given the opportunity?
I mean, speaking of American Ninja Warrior, like I've been to ninja gyms, and those are really fun. Like I would like to try. I'm not super athletic, but I'd like to be on to try the obstacle course, even if I fall flat on my face. And in terms of the challenge, like I think it's a goddamn shame that they haven't made challenge gyms where they take some of those obstacle courses. But yeah, probably the challenge. I don't know. I don't know enough reality TV to.
Growing up, my sisters and I all watched Survivor like super religiously, but like you could not pay me to go on an island with a bunch of people I've never met and like be hungry. No, not me. What is one thing you absolutely cannot live without that is not your phone or your computer?
I think my blazers. I like my blazers. I have too
All of
many.
them.
Yeah, every single one of them. It's a really useful way to just like, this is like a short sleeve shirt I'd wear to like the beach, but it's underneath a blazer. It looks very.
So now it's professional.
Now it's respectable. So like
The day to night look, you know?
exactly. Or you have a t-shirt on a blazer, and then you're like the tech bro vibe. So like it dresses up anything.
Yeah, I live like in the center of the tech bro universe.
You know what's up.
Yeah. There's a reason I don't date around these parts, you know? Ever. No. I used to work in San Francisco and like insufferable. Okay. We won't talk about that. Let's see. Sorry. If you woke up tomorrow and were a Disney villain, what would be your first act of mischief?
What Disney villains have like the most interesting superpowers though? If I was like Gaston or something, I'm just like a buff guy. But like, is there one that's like an animal that can fly or something? I don't know. I would prefer mischief that I couldn't do as a human. So if I could be.
Did I have a math when I wrote
I mean, I guess Ursula in the Little Mermaid, she can swim around. If I could just suddenly be Ursula and like swim across the Pacific, that would be cool. I don't know.
Know people's voices, apparently.
Well, yeah, or like I don't know, like I don't know.
That's fine.
Um,
Let's see. Another question. Yeah, so people are either going to love or hate this. I don't know. Honestly, I don't really care. Um,
the
so, okay.
question, the next question, or the
Oh,
current.
no. I just mean like generally, like the way I've decided that just to sort of change up the interview, the way
Yeah.
I just kicked my life. Um, okay, let's see. If you had to describe your personality using an ice cream flavor, what would it be?
See, this is a fraught question because my
Yes,
initial thought is just,
intellectualize it.
well, yeah, well, my favorite type of ice cream is like peanut butter chocolate ice cream. So if you took a
Because
Reese's
it's
cup and you,
delicious.
well, yeah, if you took a Reese's cup and turned it into ice cream, that's the best type of ice cream. But is that my personality? I don't know. Um, oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't know enough ice cream flavors. I'm just gonna say chocolate peanut butter because it's amazing and I'm amazing. So
There you go. That's all there is to it. That's actually all the questions I have. Of
a
which
powerful
honestly,
question to end on.
I just was thinking that when I was a kid, I used to go get ice cream, and it was like for some reason I was obsessed with bubblegum ice cream, which is just like very strange to me now. So I would like pick all the bubblegum out, and the flavor is gone when you chew the bubblegum for like two
No,
seconds. But for some
but
reason, yeah. And also, like, I don't know, I've always just been a creature of habit. So every single time I get the same damn thing. Like,
yeah, the bubblegum from the bubblegum ice cream seems to defeat the. Maybe not. So I used to pick the marshmallows out of Lucky Charms and just eat the marshmallows. So kind of the same, right?
sorry, who's amongst us has not done that? Does
I
somebody,
mean, whomst.
did it, who's? Did a kid ever, like, get Lucky Charms and be like, these bland corn things?
It's actually
Like,
a C tier cereal. I mean, it's way
it's not good.
overhyped. Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't like Lucky Charms.
with
Personally, I'm a
with or
big fan
without
of
the
Captain
charm.
Crunch
Yeah, see, that's an A tier cereal.
and like Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I'm noticing a theme
Also
here.
A tier.
Um,
I mean, I like breakfast because I named my YouTube channel after it. So I've frequently thought about doing a spin-off show about cereal.
just the history of cereal.
Yeah, breakfast for breakfast and just cereal reviews.
Cereal reviews. I would, I would probably watch that just out of curiosity more than anything. I don't. Here's another question. Do you eat cereal anymore?
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I mean,
Really?
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Why not? Yeah. I do. I mean, UPS has really good sales on cereal. You just go in, it's like two for $5, family size frosted flakes. Yes, please.
Hey, Frosted Flakes.
That's a B tier cereal, but B tier is like good enough to eat.
I mean, it is good enough to eat. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not gonna cereal shame you. Okay, you eat cereal as much as
I have
you
two
want.
PhDs, one in religious studies and one in cereal. So please don't.
Sorry, I should have known. I should have looked this up.
Yeah, you're stepping on my
research.
academic credentials here.
I'm crunching them, you might say.
Touche.
Okay. Anywho, this has been a lot of fun. I hope everybody watching enjoyed this as much as I have. And I keep kicking my goddamn mic. Before we go, let people know where they can find you, what you're up to, how they can support you, where you're selling like your feet pictures. No, I'm kidding. All of that.
Yeah, I mean, youtube.com/religion for breakfast. It's kind of the main place I am online. Yeah, just the best place to support me is on Patreon, which is patreon.com/religion for breakfast. But if you haven't watched the channel, just watch the channel first. I try to be the one-stop shop religious studies YouTube channel. I do everything from early Christianity to Buddhism to religious studies theory. So like, share, subscribe.
All right. Well, first, do you have anything coming up? Anything coming out?
Yeah, I mentioned the AO Stray video. So that's kind of the answering the question is, Easter a pagan religion? And I have an ongoing Buddhism series and an ongoing Taoism series if you're into East Asian religion. So,
all right. On that note, folks, my producer says I need to remind everyone that I too have a Patreon. Not that I do much on it these days. And like, comment, subscribe, send me cookies. I don't know, do whatever. Thanks for watching.
Cereal.
It's been super fun. Yeah, for cereal. Or send him cereal, because it sounds like he's eating a
I
lot.
always need it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, get a P.O. box, and I'm sure we can get some cereal your way.
Good.
Although, to be fair, I did try to send coffee as a gift once and was rejected.
Yeah, that's the one thing I don't need.
All right, friends, family, enemies, I will see you all next time. Bye.
Oh shit. You done fucked up now. Ain't nothing but a gangster party.